Good morning, Year 10. I'm hoping that the video that I uploaded for last lesson was helpful to some of you. I'm still seeing some mistakes around the content and what you need to be writing to answer the question. Please do go back, watch the video. It's meant to be as helpful as possible. But I know it's a bit weird that we're doing this kind of not real teaching at the moment, or not traditional teaching. So I'm going to walk you through a 6 mark today. I'm going to try a new technology where you'll be able to see my screen and what I'm talking about whilst I'm talking. So you might want to just watch this, or you might want to have me on in the background whilst you're looking at the slides yourself. That's up to you. But I'm going to try and do it so you can just watch it and then come to answer it. To start with, the 6 mark question is a test on how good you are at looking at a source and analysing its reliability. Reliability is a tricky one because if something is reliable, it is something that we can use knowing that it is true fact, I guess, is the easiest way to say it. Whereas if something is useful, it's can you use it to find something else out. So you're going to have to open up the PowerPoint, or I'm going to do it here, and have a look at the 2 sources that I have uploaded at the last 2 slides on your PowerPoint. Okay, so we've got the exam question. Study sources Q and R. Which of the 2 sources is the more reliable to a historian studying the establishment of the National Health Service? Now, this one is a reliable question, not a useful question, a utility one. So by saying it's reliable, we are going to be talking about how much really we can trust it. And that means we have to look at who wrote it, why it was written, where it came from. Okay, that is the NOP, the nature, origin, and purpose. And what you're going to be looking at specifically is about someone trying to find out about the establishment of the National Health Service. So when it was set up, that's what establishment means. And obviously we know what the NHS is based on our own knowledge from just living in Britain at the moment, or as well the other slides that I have on this PowerPoint. Let's ignore all of this for a second, because before we even think about writing about it, we have to look at the sources. So if we look at source Q, we've got a cartoon. I've said this to you guys before, but it is possible / probable that you will have a picture as one of your sources. It's fairly easy to analyze a picture, but you have to almost be obvious about what you're saying. So as you can see, I have made some comments about it that I want you to be thinking about when you answer the question. So here it says hill meets mountain, and the source is a cartoon published by the Daily Mirror in 1946, suggesting that Bevan's proposal to create an NHS were popular. Okay, so you've got to look at the picture. I know that from the source, from the information I've given you on this PowerPoint, we don't look at Secretary Hill. They're not mentioned. However, he's a secretary, he's dressed in uniform, he looks a bit fancy, he's probably a politician. You don't really need to know anything else. And we can probably see what he believes in based on where he is in the picture. So as it says here, we don't exactly know who this is from the course content, but you can assume it's a government member against the NHS. And he's stood over the BMA's 139 objections, which is a small number if you think about it. And you need to consider, as a pupil answering this exam question, what is the BMA? And we know from slide 5 that it is the British Medical Association. Okay, and we know that the BMA were against the NHS creation to start with. On the other side, we've got a massive pile of papers that says lots of people, well, that for me implies that lots of people supported the creation of the NHS, many more than those who opposed it. Yeah, we're comparing this little pile to this big pile. It tells me that people are more for it than they are against it. Okay, that's kind of just the picture. And I haven't even highlighted this, but hill meets mountain. Basically, hopefully some of you are aware of the saying mountain, making a mountain out of a molehill. So making something bigger than it needs to be, making a big deal out of something that doesn't need to be made a big deal out of. So you could argue that this man is making a big deal out of the NHS when actually lots of people are in support of it. What we need to look at now is kind of the source itself. It is published in the Daily Mirror. Now, you will have to have a bank in your head of tabloid newspapers, And a tabloid newspaper is basically an accessible newspaper, especially, let's say, 50, 60 years ago, but still modern day. It's an accessible newspaper. They're usually quite cheap. They're usually kind of guided towards the working class of people. So it was a tabloid newspaper and very widely read. That means lots of people will have read it. And particularly, it was, I've put in inverted commas here, common people. So normal people. And in this case, the people who the NHS would have benefited most. It says it's from 1946, so we should know that the reforms were suggested in 1946, weren't put into place until 1948. So that's going to affect our reliability, remember that. And then on the other side, we've got creation of the NHS was popular in the 1946, pre being created. And we know that because that's what the picture is basically saying. Okay, you've now looked at source Q, you've thought about source Q. You might start to think, okay, well, because it's from a specific newspaper, or because it's from a specific time, or because it's telling me some message, that's going to impact how reliable it is. Source R is the next one. And it is an account which appeared in the Daily Mail on the 5th of July 1948, the day the NHS officially came into being. On Monday morning, you awaken a new Britain, a state which takes over its citizens 6 months before they are born, providing care and free services from their birth, their schooling, sickness, workless days, widowhood, and retirement. Finally, it helps pay the cost of their departure. All of this with free doctoring, dentistry, and medicine, free bath chairs too if needed, for 4 shillings 11 dimes, which in the modern day is 25p, of your weekly pay packet. Okay, again, let's analyse the source itself. It's telling me what the NHS is offering. It basically means that as a baby in the womb, you are being looked after by the state. There's services from your birth, from school, from when you're sick, from when you're not working, from if a partner dies, from when you retire, and even when it says cost of your departure, it basically means being supported when you die. Okay, so this is telling me a lot about what the NHS was offering. And it even tells me how much it cost and how available it would have been to people. Okay, so really, even though now 25p of your pay packet would be nothing, it would have been still more, would have been more money then, but it still would have been a small percentage. If we're looking at the source itself, this one's from the Daily Mail, a tabloid newspaper, so it's very similar to the Mirror, so what I've already said before, and the same applies. It is read by the common people of England, so it will show what the working class of people wanted to know was available to them. Okay, so this is going to be important. This source is telling me what the working class of people may have thought about the NHS. However, when we come to answering the question, it doesn't tell me about what the middle and upper classes may have thought. So that's going to impact its reliability. It's from 1948, which was when the NHS actually started to exist, not just in theory, which is 1946 and earlier. And I think this one's different to the other one because you can actually work out the tone because there's more words. Think about the tone of this source. Why do you think it was written? It's obviously in support of the NHS. So that's telling me again that the working class people are supportive of the establishment of the NHS. Yeah, remember we're looking at the establishment and we're looking at the reliability. That's me analysing the sources. So now it's going to come to us to actually look at the exam question and how do we answer that. And I'm going to switch back onto my face. So you'll have to open this on another slide if you want to see what I'm talking about whilst I'm talking about it. So now that we've assessed the sources, we have to go back to the question and see if we can answer it. You can see it's a 6-mark question, so it's not going to ask for you to write lots and lots, but it's about the content, and that being really specific and really keyed into the question is what is going to get you your 6 marks. And I'll say this from the beginning, and I've said this to you before, if you don't talk about the nature, the origin and the purpose and how that affects reliability, you're not going to get anything higher than about 2 or 3 marks. Yeah, and to get half marks on a 6-mark question is frustrating because you can easily get 6 on this one. We'll also be looking at something quite similar when we do the Germany topic, and we'll have to do these skills again. So you might as well learn how to do it now, and it is done, and there's not much more to worry about. So if we look at the PowerPoint, just onto slide 7, I've given you sentence starters, but you can really do this how you like. What is important is that you do the kappa format. content, actual reality, provenance, accuracy. And obviously the accuracy applies to, is it accurate when we're talking about reliability, or is it accurate when we're talking about utility, usefulness? So I'm going to tell you from the off, both these sources are reliable to an extent, okay? So source Q is reliable, is somewhat reliable to a historian studying the establishment of the NHS, because it shows me a picture of the public being very much in support of the NHS versus the people who were against it. Okay, so that tells me that I can see what it shows me. Yeah, actual reality. I know that lots of people needed support when it came to health because medicine was expensive, living conditions were poor. I know that the government wanted to support more people, and the society was becoming more of a welfare state. All the things I've told you about today and last lesson are relevant to this. So that's your actual reality. Just give me some of your own knowledge. Your own knowledge can be, I know that people wanted the NHS. Yeah, because we know from the lesson today that it got used massively as soon as it was created. Okay, so you just give me some of your own knowledge to prove to your examiner you're not just plucking things out of thin air, and you do know about this and you're not just using the source to help you. Then the really important part is the P, the provenance. Okay, so you're going to tell me about the provenance, either the nature, the origin, the purpose, a mix of them, and you're from that going to tell me how reliable it is. So you might say the source was published in the Daily Mirror, which I know is a tabloid newspaper, therefore it gives me an idea about the people who are reading it, who are most likely the working class. That means that the source is reliable for finding out what the working class thought about the NHS, but it may not show me what the upper classes thought. Furthermore, as it is from 1946, it is pre-establishment of the NHS, therefore the accuracy of finding out about the establishment of the NHS may be kind of questionable, as this cartoon is from 2 years before the NHS actually got created. Okay, so you've done P and A together because in talking about the provenance, you've told me whether it's reliable or not. If we then go back to source R, you'll say source R is, and again, you don't have to have them contrasting. You can say source R is also somewhat reliable to a historian studying the establishment of the NHS, because it is giving an opinion of what one newspaper thought about the changes that the NHS was going to make. I know that it supported women who were pregnant. I know that it supported you if you were sick. I know it supported schooling and people with free school meals. So I know that what is in the source is an accurate representation of what the NHS offered. Yeah, so that is reliable because I know from my own knowledge that this information is true. Again, talk about the origin, the nature, the purpose. Yeah, so again, the fact it's from a tabloid newspaper again tells me that it is what the working class would have thought about the changes, and the tone of this source is incredibly positive about the NHS. Therefore, its purpose is probably in support of the NHS. Go back then to how accurate it is. You might say, yeah, it is accurate and it is reliable in telling me what one part of society thought about the establishment of the NHS. However, again, it doesn't quite show me what the other parts of society might have thought, yeah, because we know that people didn't want it, especially the more conservative and often the more rich people, because they didn't want to give these handouts to people. The last paragraph, and it is always really short, you don't have to make it long, you just come to a decision, and I'm not asking you to say this one's really good and this one's rubbish, but just say one is slightly more reliable than the other for this reason. And I personally would probably say that source R is more reliable to the historian because it is more specific to what the NHS what the NHS offered, and therefore why it was established. Source Q only really tells me that some people wanted it and more people wanted it than didn't. Whereas source R is more reliable in telling me exactly what was offered by the NHS. So if I'm using the sentence starters that I've got, of the two, source art is slightly more reliable to a historian studying the establishment of the NHS because it gives specific details about what was offered and for how much. So that's what I'd say. And then instead of saying in comparison source Q is, I would just say, however, both sources are from tabloid newspapers, which impacts its reliability because I know that tabloid newspapers are read by only one part of society. So it doesn't show me about the establishment, the opinions about the establishment of the National Health Service for everyone, but it does give me a good picture about what some people and the people who use the NHS most thought about it. But I hope at least by me talking through the sources, you can come to a decision about what reliability actually means. They're both reliable, they're both real sources. The fact that one is a drawing and one is written makes no difference to their reliability. But what you need to look at perhaps is, where was it published? What is the opinion? How do I know that that's what everyone thought? Yeah, what is it missing? Some of you do that really well. It does tell me this, but it doesn't tell me this that I know. Yeah, if you can point out to your examiner that something is missing, you're already leagues ahead of someone else. So make sure that you're doing that. Again, as always, if you've got any questions, drop me a message on Google Classroom. Otherwise, good luck.